And now another episode of Desperate Conspire Wives. Today's episode, Natasha.
On today's episode of Desperate Conspire Wives, we look into the creator who says things like this.
But I know the stuff that I'm talking about. And everything that I tell you, unless I say it's my opinion, I can back up with a document. Please don't put things in my chat that you don't have evidence to back up. I will debate any of you any day at any time on the actual facts of this case. But you better have your shit together, because I can assure you that I do. But I am also very, very well educated on this case. Very. Much more so than the majority. I don't care if you put your opinion in here as long as you state that this is my opinion. But when you state something as an absolute fact, no. Anybody who thinks that this case is over or that it's cut and dried and the right person is in prison, you have not read the documents. I have. Every single one of them.
So you would think with all of those comments she's made about knowing the case, reading the documents, not wanting people to put unfounded things in her comments, like only facts, that she would be a very factual and ethical content creator. But you would be wrong, as I will show you. Also, she doesn't debate anyone. The minute you go in her box and try to show her the actual facts from the documents, she boots you. She wants an echo chamber. But let's get started.
Hey, Sonny. They said that one of the victims was the CI.
So what she's referencing there is body cam footage of Police Captain Roger Lanier, and a lot of people think he's saying that one of the victims was a CI. Now, I personally don't believe that's what he's saying. It doesn't look like his mouth formation of what he's saying lines up with CI, but I'm going to let you decide. I'm not going to try to tell you what to hear. I'm not one of those content creators that if I don't know for sure what's being said, I'm not going to say, oh no, you're hearing this. But also just know there is no evidence at all of anybody in that house being a CI. And if you go through and you look at their histories, because public records are available online, none of them had any past citations that would lead to even being a CI. Like the worst anyone had was like a DUI. So none of them in that house had any sort of history or background. But I'll play the body cam for you. And like I say, you decide.
Okay. I don't know the names of the victims.
I hear what you're saying. Xana's mother was a CI. Maddie's dad and stepmother were CIs. But I do not think that Xana was.
Now, there is also no indication that Xana's mom was a CI or that Maddie's dad and stepmom were CIs. And I will say this, I do know for a fact that Xana's mom is not a CI. I can't state that I know for a fact about Maddie's dad and stepmom, but I'm pretty sure they weren't because of the way Idaho handles drug arrests. Okay, because a lot of people point to the fact that they were getting on probation a lot, or they were getting out of jail quickly, and it's because in the state of Idaho, they do drug courts and they do jurisdictional rider programs because they would rather spend the money on somebody being in rehab than being in prison. And it's actually cheaper as well. And people will go, well, but they were arrested for like intent to sell. Yes, but if you go in and you look at their records on the iCourt website, those intent to sell charges were dropped. And that's because Idaho is one of the states where, well, for instance, marijuana is still illegal in Idaho. They are very strict on quantities. And so just a personal use quantity will get you a trafficking charge in Idaho if you're at a certain amount. And so when you go to court and say, hey, I'm an addict, that's personal use, they'll drop it. Because unless they can prove you had intent to sell and that you were selling, just the amount alone, if it's within what is an addiction range, they can't make those charges stick. And the parents were addicts, or I mean, they are addicts even though they're sober now, and kudos to them for being sober now. What an accomplishment. But I'll show you how the Idaho jurisdictional riders and drug courts work. So Idaho has retained jurisdiction court, also called a rider. It's a sentencing option available to judges. Clients sentenced to a rider are incarcerated in an IDOC facility, but are under the judge's jurisdiction as they receive treatment and programming. Sentencing judges can place the resident on probation upon successful completion of the rider, or they can relinquish jurisdiction and sentence them to prison based on their behavior and progress during the retained jurisdiction period. And here's an article that goes into it a little bit more. And I'm going to skim through this, but you can pause and read it. But a judge in Idaho in a felony case may sentence a defendant to a 1-year period of retained jurisdiction. When the judge does this, he informs the defendant of the underlying prison sentence that will be imposed if the defendant does not successfully complete the rider program during this 1-year period. The defendant is then held in a county jail until they can be moved to the Receiving and Diagnostics Unit in Idaho Department of Corrections. Staff determines their needs and places them in the appropriate facility where they receive different levels of programming and education. Now, there are 2 rider programs, the Correctional Alternative Placement Program, CAP, and the traditional rider. CAP is designed for defenders who need assistance addressing substance abuse problems. It is generally a shorter program, and defendants can finish in as little as 90 days. So CAP would be mainly for the drug addicts, and traditional rider is for cognitive and behavioral issues. And if the defendant fails to successfully complete his or her rider, the court will, in almost every circumstance, relinquish jurisdiction to the IDOC, which means they will start serving out his or her underlying sentence. Still, the defendant does get credit for time served toward that underlying sentence for all days spent on the rider program at the RDU and while waiting at the county jail for transport to his or her rider program. So that's why you'll think it looks like they're hardly spending any time in jail. And when you look at their records, you'll see all the credit for time served. That's because they're under these jurisdictional riders. Now, the Kootenai County Drug Court, which is where most of the convictions for Xana's mom and Maddie's dad and stepmom were at. The drug court provides an alternative to traditional prosecution. It handles crimes committed by medium to high-risk substance-dependent offenders. Participants are required to attend intensive outpatient treatment and appear before the same drug court judge twice a month. They will be on intensive probation supervision and submit random observed drug tests at a minimum twice per week. Drug court program is approximately 15 to 18 months long and includes 4 phases and a 3-month aftercare program. The length of time is based on individualized needs, treatment goals, and phase competencies. Drug courts represent a very non-traditional approach to criminal offenders who are substance dependent. Rather than focusing only on the crimes committed and the punishments they receive, drug court attempts to solve some of their underlying problems that may have contributed to the poor choices that led to their criminal behavior. So when you're seeing people saying, well, they must be CIs because they were getting these probations and short sentences, no, they were in the drug courts and the jurisdictional rider programs. And Xana's mom did unfortunately not complete her program and did end up doing time at the state correctional facility. Her probation was revoked. So it's important to understand what you're reading when you're looking at somebody's I-court history and all the charges and the sentencing and the credit for time served and all those things, because it's pretty clear that they were all involved with drug court and jurisdictional riders. So hopefully that helped you learn something today. Now let's continue.
I don't even think that Bethany was there.
And here we go again with Bethany wasn't there. That flies in the face of all facts that we know. And here is a still shot again from Officer Noon's body cam. And you can see Bethany, where I've circled, standing by the telephone pole right across the street. She went over there after she handed her phone to Dylan after starting out the 911 call. Also, this is from Ann Taylor. This is a defense filing. So for anyone saying that Bethany was not in the house with Dylan all night, this says they were in the same bedroom. They were together with the ability to talk to each other. Then it says, despite her, this was about Dylan, her stated fear of leaving her room, she does to join BF downstairs. To get to BF's bedroom, DF passed the front door of the residence. BM was steps from the front door. Neither of them left the house. So that's Ann Taylor saying neither of them left the house. And then further on again, she talks about how she was with Bethany. So both of them were in the house. None of them left and went anywhere. They did cell brite extractions on their cell phones. They looked at their GPS locations, everything. That they were at the house. They weren't at a hotel. Bethany wasn't at a party. She wasn't down the street. She didn't just come back in Jenna McClure's car. Yes, Jenna McClure was pulling up, but that's because they had messaged her. Both Dylan and Bethany had, texted Jenna. So this is such a ridiculous rumor that is not based in fact. So I don't understand why Natasha is still repeating that Bethany wasn't there.
So let me talk about a few rumors. And I want to make very sure y'all understand that these are rumors. These are rumors that have been going around since this happened. I typically don't talk about rumors, but I think these are important.
She typically doesn't talk about rumors. Well, if I was Maury Povich, I would say the lie detector said that's a lie, because most of her lives are filled with rumors. What we just discussed about Bethany, rumor. About parents being CI, rumor. But let's continue.
There was a rumor going around on several different places that Maddie was tired of Dylan running rugs through the house and flushed a bag of them.
Yeah, that's definitely a rumor. Not true. And had you done your due diligence, you would know that Tommy Jude had made that up. So here's the clip of him admitting that he made that up and laughing about it, no less.
There's still the rumor that Maddie flushed drugs down the toilet.
You're right. Well, yeah, I'm the one that started all that.
Oh, you are?
Then. Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
Do you believe that still, Tommy?
I started out with maybe she flushed some drugs down. Maybe she flushed $75,000, and I started out at 75. And the next thing you know, people were saying she flushed down 275,000, and I'm going, okay, whatever.
Officer Rosinski. And Corbin Smith is who was inside the house with no body cam.
Well, actually, no, that's not true. Rosinski didn't go in the house. He was just there to watch the outside of the door, and I'll show you the first part of his body cam when he walks up to take over out in front of the house. And Corbin Smith was in the house several times, and he had his body cam on every time he was in the house. And I'll show you some of one of his body cams when he was in the house. So not sure where you're getting that they were both in the house without body cams on, but that is not true.
Yeah, man, go get some water, take a break, and come back whenever you need. So
Hydrated, finish my lunch. So I got so far. Go up and still inside. Oh, I should probably grab mine. You should use your pen.
what is in right here? Am I technically in?
Yours at the door, so I'm not inside right now. I was out.
Bethany said that she saw under her door a bright flash and a bang. But I showed y'all the other night on Patreon when we were going through the crime scene photos that it is impossible for Bethany to have seen under her door. from where she was laying. You can't see under her door. There is no line of sight.
Actually, that's not true. Maury Povich would say the lie detector determined that you lied again. Her bed was along the side wall of the house, that wall that was against that side street that goes up between the house and the apartment, and she had direct sight to the door right across her room. Let me show you. So we're going to look at some of the photos. So in this one, her door is open and you can see her bed from the open door. So line of sight, she can see her door from the bed. Here's another picture looking in her room from her room door, and you can see her bed is directly across on the opposite wall. And then this was from the real estate website, and you can see the window, and her desk was over by the window, and then her closet, and then where I have that red dot is the position of where her bed was, over on that far wall, and so she has a direct line of sight to that door. So yes, she would have been able to see any light or anything from underneath her door. Her bed had a direct line of sight to her door.
There is, or was, a special prosecutor appointed to this case in March of last year. When special prosecutors are appointed to cases, it is because they have some type of litigation experience that would help try a case. Joshua Hurwitt, Hurwitt, was appointed to this case. He is a former federal prosecutor who has two areas of expertise. Two. The first one is financial COVID fraud. Pretty sure that ain't it. The second one is prosecuting and convicting 10 members of the Aryan Knights.
Okay, so Hurwitt didn't just have two areas of expertise. You do understand as a federal DOJ attorney that a lot of the cases that they would deal with would be drug cases, but he actually had expertise in large-scale prosecutions, multi-million-dollar securities and wire fraud cases, false claims acts, RICO prosecutions, cybercrime probes. He also has courtroom expertise. He did federal prosecutions, commercial litigation. He also was an appellate lawyer, so he had lots of experience as a prosecutor. He wasn't brought on because of his drug expertise. Also, the reason why he was brought on was because Ingrid Beatty had been shuffled around. So Bill Thompson had requested another assistant attorney general or somebody else to help out based on staffing needs. And it talks about this in the petition for the appointment of a special assistant attorney general. And so Hurwitt is who they replaced Ingrid Beatty with. Again, nothing to do with drugs.
The Aryan Knights, who, interestingly enough, are responsible for the majority of the in that part of Idaho. Dylan's boyfriend, Quinn, was a known rug dealer. His father is connected to the AKs.
That's another Maury Povich moment again. The lie detector determined that that's a lie. Quinn is not a drug dealer, not a known drug dealer. His dad, not affiliated with the Aryan Knights. So both lies. Those were rumors that people started to try to make Dylan look bad, to try to claim that somehow she had involvement. So they tried to drag her boyfriend and his dad into things. Now, I'm not saying his dad's a saint and doesn't have a criminal history, but he's definitely not an Aryan Knight, and Quinn's definitely not a drug dealer. Now, as far as the drug angle that you still seem to want to hint at, Bill Thompson was very clear. Drugs were not part of the case. Let's take a listen.
Could drugs be involved in all of this?
I have not heard that there's any suspicion that drugs played a role in the killings.
So not like a drug deal gone bad or something like that?
I am not aware of anything like that, no.
Okay, and also they said the autopsy results showed no evidence of any illegal drug use at all, and we know that to be true because now we know that they had Adderall and alcohol in their systems. Well, Ethan and Xana had the Adderall, and they had prescriptions for the Adderall. So they had no illegal substances in their systems at all at the time of the murders.
Anybody who thinks that Brian Kohberger did this by himself in under 12 minutes needs a lobotomy.
All right, so it's not the first time that somebody stabbed several people to death in a short amount of time, and unfortunately it won't be the last time. But just a couple examples for you. This was the Bondi Mall in Australia. The perpetrator stabbed 10 people and killed 6. Now it says 7 deaths because one of them was himself because he was shot by the police officer. But 6 minutes is all it took from when he started stabbing until he got shot by the police officer. 3:32 p.m. to 3:38 p.m. 6 minutes. He stabbed 10 people, killing 6. This was the Brentwood 5 stabbing up in Calgary. And they believe the attack started right around 1:21 when he grabbed a kitchen knife and started stabbing. And the first of 3 911 calls came in at 1:21. And by 1:34, EMS was there. And the perpetrator had already taken off running down the street at 1:34. So he was already gone from there 13 minutes later when EMS arrived. And he killed 5 people. One of them was transported to the hospital, but was pronounced dead. So, well, actually 2 were transferred and pronounced dead. But he killed 5 people in less than 13 minutes. So, again, it happens. It's more than possible. And in fact, when they did the time test runs, they found that inmate 163214 actually could have done it in less than the time that it took him. So to act like it's impossible or to act like you have to be a ninja or superpowers is absolutely false. I don't think people understand that an unarmed person against a knife is no match, especially a knife the size of a K-bar. And he had the element of surprise on them. So let's just put that one to bed as well.
2 days later, a man 30 miles away is found wandering around almost incoherent, covered in stab wounds, bruises, cuts, and scratches.
Now we get to the whole Nicholas Moitch part. The gift from Pav that just keeps on giving. Redacted name. So we still don't know 100% for sure if that was Nicholas Moitch. Okay, old Pav thinks because the date of death and the birth year match that he's found the person in the redacted, but this is the problem when you do redacted names and think you know who the person is, you might really not know who the person is. But regardless, I'm not sure where Natasha is getting that he was stabbed, because there's nothing saying that this person had stab wounds. Okay, let's look. It says he was found wandering the streets of Lewiston with cuts and abrasions to his torso and arms. So nowhere on there does it say stab wounds. Cuts and abrasions.
He told them that he had been in a car accident, and he had a month prior. He also walked with a limp.
Okay, first of all, he never said the car accident was a month prior. I think you're mixing up your little false tips that came into the MPD, because there was one that had talked about a car accident a month prior, but that was not Moitch, or the person that's redacted that everyone seems to think is Moitch. And also, where are you getting that he walked with a limp? You say you always bring receipts, that you can always back up everything you say, so please back up that he had a limp, because I'm not finding anywhere that he had a limp. So I'd love to know where you got that confirmed from. Okay, let's look at what this says when they got the tip from the medical examiner's office. So it says he was supposed to have been involved in an auto accident, but the injuries were not consistent. And it says no collision was reported, but a vehicle registered to him was found abandoned in a field later. So, and that was on November 15th, 2022. So there's nothing saying that this accident he was in was a month prior. And in fact, his vehicle was found abandoned in a field later, on November 15th. So let's continue.
His name was Nicholas Moitch. Nicholas Moitch. He died on November 19th from his injuries. There was an FBI informant whose last name was Farley. There's another video on my channel when you can literally hear somebody saying Farley.
First of all, there's no indication that Farley is an FBI informant. And secondly, the person on Linda Lane that sounds like they're yelling Farley, you do understand that there's also college students that were at U of I at the time with the last name of Farley. So it could have been somebody yelling for their friend. Okay. It also could have been somebody yelling for their dog or their cat. So there is absolutely zero proof that Tyson Farley was there at Linda Lane and whose name they were calling. Those are all things that have been made up, originated with Pav over on YouTube, and then just spreads like wildfire. But let's continue.
Farley told the police that Moitch received his injuries because he was given a job at the King Road house and he fucked it up. Was given a job and he took a crew to the house. Things went wrong.
First of all, Farley is not who called in that tip that claimed to be, or that was an informant at the IDOC. And he definitely was not talking about Moitch, although, I mean, he wasn't talking about whoever had the redacted name on the other tip from the Spokane Medical Examiner. But we know that this tip was not from Farley because, first of all, it says that he was in jail in both Spokane and Kootenai County. Tyson Farley has never been arrested in Kootenai County and has never been in jail in Kootenai County. You can check his record through I-court system. And then it talked about how he had warrants. He was transferred to Kootenai County for a warrant. Well, he wouldn't have been transferred to Kootenai County because he didn't have a warrant out of Kootenai County. Also, it says this person was arrested in Airway Heights, and Tyson Farley was arrested in Spokane, not Airway Heights. They're two different cities, two different jurisdictions. He was not arrested in Airway Heights. So when Farley got arrested on his fugitive from justice, it was out of Latah County. He was arrested in Spokane, and he was transferred to Latah County. Okay, so we know this is not Farley. This person was transferred to Kootenai County. Also, they called Kootenai County to verify, and that person was there. And this person is claiming they were the ones who got their legs broken, not Nicholas Moitch, because you're trying to claim that Tyson Farley called and said that Nicholas Moitch was in a car accident and had his legs broken. No, this person's claiming they stopped to watch a car accident, of which was never found. The car accident this person claimed happened with a person being ejected was never found. And they're claiming that they got their legs broken for stopping and watching. So that's, you're completely conflating two different tips that were in the documents, but you're also misunderstanding them as well.
Now, Moitch also, while he was in jail, because he is a lifelong criminal, told his cellmates that he was security for rug shipments that were delivered to the King Road house, because it's known as a party house for more than one reason.
So since you claim you always bring receipts, can you please show your receipts on where he said that he was security for the 1122 King Road house? Please. I would love to see where Nicholas Moitch told cellmates that. Because that's not in any documents. So where did you find that? Inquiring minds want to know, Natasha.
Why do you think they were always having parties? Why do you think that house had more parties than any other house in that town?
Hey, so can you back up your claims, Natasha? Can you back up what you're inferring was that it was a drug house? And can you back up that they had more parties than any other house in Moscow? You do understand this is a college campus. There's lots of parties going on. Fraternities, sororities, live-out houses, apartments. So can you prove that they had more parties than anyone else? I'll be waiting.
December 13th, A man walked in to a casino in Washington who is a known former associate of Xana's mother through Ruggs.
Okay, please show me your proof that this person was a known associate of Xana's mom through drugs. Because I've looked up this person that did the casino stabbing, and he's never lived anywhere near Kara. He's never been incarcerated in any of the same facilities as Kara. There is absolutely zero evidence that they knew each other. But by all means, show your proof. You claim you always bring receipts.
And sat down at a poker table, turned to his right, pulled out a tactical / hunting knife, and stabbed a woman in her head. Head is the key word there. Head wounds, stabbing people in the head is very uncommon. Look it up for yourself.
Okay, so here's the guy you're talking about. Vancouver man gets 25 years for stabbing 4 at Le Centre card room. Guilty plea and sentencing for man who stabbed 4. And you can pause and read this because I'm going to go through this really fast. He was sentenced for stabbing 4 people and then attempted to elude police. He went into the card table at the casino and lost all his money. He got up and began attacking people with a knife at random. So one of the victims said he was stabbed in the forehead when he tried to intervene. So the prosecutor said Harmier first stabbed the person sitting next to him at the card table multiple times, followed by Harrington. Then he ran at a 73-year-old woman and stabbed her multiple times. Then he spotted a man running into the parking lot, and he gave chase and stabbed him multiple times, inflicting an injury to the man's arm that required a tourniquet before driving away from the casino. What Natasha's trying to claim is that this guy from the casino stabbing was somehow involved with 1122 King Road, that he was part of this crew that went into the house, and because he stabbed somebody in the head at the casino, that's like an MO. But there's no indication that guy had an MO of stabbing people in the head. Okay, he was mentally ill, from what the article stated, and you could clearly tell that he was just stabbing. Like, the guy that got stabbed in the head was because he tried to intervene. He was probably trying to get the knife away. So the guy was just attacking. So that doesn't mean that he had a specific MO of stabbing people in the head, or like only in the head, or that would be an indication that he was the same person that went into 1122 King. I love it when people like Natasha try to connect imaginary dots, because it's just like, what are you looking at? Because that doesn't exist. But let's continue.
I think that Moitch and his crew took it too far. And y'all, I've told y'all a million times, I don't believe in coincidences. We know that Kaylee was asphyxiated, right?
She had brought up, and I forgot to put that part in, sorry, but she had brought up that Nicholas Moitch had been in jail before for domestic abuse and strangulation, and that's why she brought up saying Kaylee was asphyxiated, but Kaylee was not asphyxiated. She had asphyxial injuries, okay? Had she been strangled, it would have said manual strangulation, okay? The asphyxial injuries were caused from the stab wounds. That was anything that causes you to have a lack of oxygen to the brain, anything that's causing you to gasp for air, like choking. She was choking on her own blood. We know that she aspirated on her blood, that it was going down into her chest cavity. So, no, Nicholas Moitch having a history of domestic violence does not equate to this murder, or that Kaylee was asphyxiated.
I think they were meant to go in and scare them. And I think it got out of hand because of the people he chose to help him.
So yeah, she's making some bold claims there that are not backed up by facts, that Nicholas Moitch went in and did the murders with a crew. That's very defamatory, Natasha.
Why weren't the other 2 hurt? Think about this. Why didn't Dylan or Bethany at any time that night or day contact their boyfriends?
Well, first of all, Bethany didn't have a boyfriend. And secondly, we don't know whether Dylan tried to contact her boyfriend or not, because they don't tell you everybody that she was messaging on Instagram and on Snapchat. So not everybody's listed that she had contacted. But let's listen to the body cam of Bethany saying she doesn't have a boyfriend.
And what about you? Do you have a current or ex-boyfriend?
No.
Okay.
There's no texts, no phone calls at all to either of their boyfriends. Because, I mean, my boyfriend doesn't live anywhere near me. But if something like this happened, I would call the police, I would call my family, and then I would call him.
First of all, you don't know what you would do until you're in that situation. So unless you've ever been in that exact same situation, you don't know what you would do. So quit saying that you would call 911 and you would call your boyfriend. Secondly, like I said, we don't know if she did text him or Snapchat him or Instagram. And also, here's the other thing, though. He was 5 hours away. So what could he do anyways if when she heard things and got scared, what good would it do to contact him? She contacted the other people in the house. She contacted Bethany. She tried to get a hold of Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, Ethan. So it was the people within proximity. So, but let's move on.
The reason that I brought it up is because I have seen 2 other people post about it today. So it's making its rounds, and I want the people who watch me to know that I am already looking into it.
And this is about the video that's allegedly from the murders, which we all know there's no video from the murders. People keep trying to pass off things from movies and other stuff as being from 11/22. But of course, she's not going to miss her opportunity to bring it up and try to grift from it. Let's listen further.
The 2 men in this video are not BK, I can tell you that right now. Don't watch it. If you come across it, don't be curious. I'm telling you right now. Breezy was so upset last night, she did not even want to, she wouldn't send it to anybody. None of my mods would she send it to. She only sent it to me. We're not giving you the location. We're not telling you where it's at. It does not need to be streaming around there. I'm going to do a Patreon on probably Wednesday night. I will not show this video. I will not show this video.
Oh, don't watch it. Don't watch it. I'm not going to show this video. Oh, but I will show still shots from it on my Patreon. Ding, 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 ding. Yeah, so she can grift.
But there are a couple of screenshots that I can show. The men were wearing all black and mask. Yes. And the pajamas are the same that she was supposed to have on. Same bracelet, same ring, same hair color.
Now, who exactly are you talking about? Kaylee, Maddie, or Xana? Because Xana didn't have any jewelry on. Maddie only had on some silver rings, and Kaylee just had on a silver earring. None of them had on a bracelet. So I'm not even sure where you're getting that it's one of them if the person was wearing a bracelet. I mean, you're so sure everything matches. The pajamas match, the jewelry match. Well, doesn't sound like you're sure.
Other people may show it. I am not. That is not what I do.
Oh, that's not what you do, huh? You don't show things. Oh, but you're going to show still shots of it. And yes, that is what you do. You're the one that showed autopsy photos from a young boy that was murdered by his stepmother. So just stop it with the, that's not what I do crap.
Law enforcement has had it since 2023.
So you're claiming law enforcement has had a video since 2023 that would be exculpatory. Really? You're really claiming that? You're going to flat out say that law enforcement hid a video that could exonerate inmate 163214. Show your proof, please.
There are some things that are not meant for public consumption. That is why when I do autopsies, I do them on Patreon. And when I go over things on there, I go through it forensically, typically.
Okay, well, Patreon is public. It's just that people have to pay to see it, but it's public. Anyone can pay to access your Patreon. So I don't know what you're trying to act like, oh, I don't show these things publicly. Also, you go through things forensically. So what exactly is your forensic training to go through autopsies and photos forensically? Would love to see your credentials.
I don't think that this is what Bethany has. There are court documents filed in Nevada that allege by Brent Kopacka and Ann Taylor that Bethany is withholding exculpatory evidence that could exonerate Brent Kopacka.
Yeah, here was the affidavit in support of that out-of-state subpoena, and that Richard Batanti, along with Ann Taylor, were trying to claim that Bethany had exculpatory information, but here's the thing. If she had exculpatory information, it must have not been very convincing to the grand jury, because she testified before the grand jury, and per Idaho law, any exculpatory information must be shown to the grand jury. So that means whatever Bethany had to say was not very compelling, because they chose to indict. Inmate 163214 was indicted. So, and exculpatory evidence is also subjective. So what Ann Taylor may have thought was exculpatory may not have been. What the prosecution thinks is exculpatory may not have been. And vice versa. So, and it could have been just something as simple as maybe Bethany having the timeline a few minutes different than Dylan. So something that they might think is exculpatory, but really doesn't change the facts of the case as far as who murdered them. So this turned out to be much ado about nothing.
His DNA, touch DNA on the button flap of the knife sheath. What about the mixture of DNA? The mixture of DNA on the outside of it that is mixed with two of the victim's blood that is unknown, an unknown male. What about that?
Okay, there was not unknown male DNA on Q1.4 from the knife sheath. It came back from the lab as a two-person mixture of Maddie and Kaylee's DNA. Where the confusion comes in is they do the autosomal testing and then the Y assay testing. And Q14 came back with 0.001 for the Y assay. That is considered by labs background noise. It is not considered validation that there was male DNA. It could have been from cross-contamination, from the sheath manufacturing, from anything like that. That quantity is so little that it does not detect that there was really male DNA there. And I can post peer-reviewed studies about that if you like, because there are studies out there, and that's why the lab came back and said it was a two-person mixture, not a three-person mixture, because that 0.001 was literally background noise.
What about the DNA under Maddie's fingernails that are to an unknown male? Not Brent Kopacka's.
So the highest likelihood ratio for that third DNA, the unknown DNA, was actually Ethan. So it was Kaylee's DNA, Maddie's own DNA, and then the unknown male. And the highest likelihood ratio, that 3.33, was Ethan, which would make sense because they lived in the same house. Also, they already said that what was under Maddie's fingernails was not from the murders because she did not have any active defensive wounds. There's no indication she even reacted. The stab wounds that she had on her arms were all like on the forearms and the top of the hands. There was no active defensive wounds.
What about the unknown male DNA in the shower drain on the first floor that has blood in the drain?
Okay, and Maury Povich says again, the lie detector has determined that's a lie. There was no blood on the first floor at all. You can see this from where they identified blood, and the stairway area between first and second floors, as they started going up, was the first place where there was blood. And also, in no showers on any of the three floors was blood found. So not only was there no blood on the first floor, but there was none in any of the showers.
What about the unknown male B blood on the handrail going down to the first floor that they tracked to 4 biological brothers?
Okay, the blood on the handrail was not tracked to the 4 brothers. That's another Maury Povich lie detector determined you're lying. The blood on the handrail unknown B was not entered into CODIS based on the location. You can pause and read that. The blood that was entered into CODIS was from, or actually not blood, it was the DNA from the knife sheath. And that was what traced to the 4 brothers as part of the IgG process. And I'm also showing why unknown B was not put into CODIS. Location was part of it, and then also it was a mixture. Okay, it was from 3 individuals. You cannot put a mixture into CODIS. And then it was low level. So there was low level results and limited data. And if you also go look, I forgot to put the other lab report on here, but it also showed that it showed signs of degradation. So all of those factors were why unknown B was not put into CODIS, and again, had nothing to do with the 4 brothers. And we're going to look at some of the testimony from Matthew Gamet and Leah Larkin to help refresh your memory about the IgG process that was done on Q1.1, which was the knife sheath. Okay, so this was Gamet talking about how he was in communication with Othram about providing them with the DNA so that they could help develop an investigative lead for them. And they had put the sample into CODIS and had not received any hits off CODIS. So right there, you know that that's not unknown B, because unknown B was not put into CODIS. I just showed you that. Now, he was asked by Ann Taylor what Othram's recommendation was to him, and he said, to my recall, was that they had several individuals that had the potential to be of interest in this investigation. And she said, well, we're in a closed setting here, so I'm going to ask you to give me the last name. And he goes, I don't recall the last name, I'm sorry. And she said, was it your understanding that these were 4 brothers? And he said, yes. And she goes, okay, what did you do in relationship to these 4 brothers? And that's when he went on to talk about how they contacted one of the brothers and he refused to give his DNA. And Ann Taylor had Leah Larkin on the stand, and she asked her about when Othram quit work, were they following a family tree that they could have led and come to inmate 163214? And Leah Larkin says yes. So based on my initial review of what they did, the crime scene profile was most likely descended from redacted, or perhaps from one of their siblings. And she further goes on to say, I haven't seen the full tree. I've just seen that they had redacted children. Othram chose one of those children and had tracked down, I believe, grandchildren. And there were 4 brothers. So those 4 brothers were on the inmate 163214 family tree. And that was all from 1.1, which was around the button snap on the sheath, not unknown male B.
And then a few days later, the FBI contacts them and says, send us all of your investigative information on those 4 biological brothers. We're going to follow through with it. And you never hear about them again. Then on the evening of December 19th, the FBI calls them and says, here's Brian Kohberger's name. We got it from a tip.
So Othram couldn't go much farther because they were abiding by terms of service on DNA websites. So that's where the FBI came in and said, give it to us. We're going to just violate terms of service, because it is not illegal to violate terms of service of a website. Now, if you go into a website and violate the terms of service and then you use what you find to commit a crime, then that's where it becomes a legal issue. But if you're just violating terms of service from a company's website, all they can do is just kick you out from being able to access their website. You know, like, oh, you can't have an account with us. Although somebody could still, try to access it. But so what the FBI did was went into GEDmatch and other programs, other databases with DNA, and they narrowed it down further on the family tree from those 4 brothers down to inmate 163214. And then once they got it narrowed down, they called MPD and said, here's a name you need to look at. And then MPD did old-fashioned detective work from that point and started pulling anything they could about him. And when it became more apparent that that was the suspect they were looking for, then they did the trash pull in Pennsylvania. And that came back, of course, the dad's DNA came back as being the father of whoever's DNA was on the sheath. It came back saying the DNA on the sheath could only be the male offspring of Michael Kohberger. So that was enough then to get the arrest warrant. And then, of course, the buccal swab upon arrest came back as a direct match. So his DNA on the sheath.
All 4 victims had defensive wounds. All 4. If they were killed in their bed, then why is both of their DNA on the second floor?
So first of all, I'm going to say you should learn the difference between active and passive defensive wounds. But that could be another whole video. But as far as their blood being down in other parts of the house, that's from cast-off, okay? Cast-off is created when blood is released as the result of a bloodied object in motion. Well, that would be the knife. So as he walked from Maddie's bedroom down to Xana's room, there was cast-off. And these documents show that cast-off from Maddie's room down to Xana's was a mixture of Kaylee's blood and Maddie's blood. And it's showing you those different spots where it was at in that report that came out almost 2 weeks ago now. A couple weeks ago now. And then it says that it should be noted that there were no drip trails of blood found on the bedroom floor. Drip trails are indicative of movement by a bleeding individual. So there were no drip trails in Maddie's bedroom, which means none of them were up and about in that bedroom. And then it says there's no physical evidence to indicate that either Ms. Gonzalez or Miss Mogan created the transfer stain, because there was also a transfer stain on Maddie's door. That was by inmate 163214 when he probably brushed the knife against the door. Then the conclusions, there's no physical evidence that any of the decedents were outside of their respective bedrooms after sustaining significant bloodletting injuries. The only decedent to move from the bed and or be standing upright after actively bleeding was Xana Kernodle. So no, none of them were in other parts of the house. They were only in the 2 bedrooms.
Any way, shape, or form believe that man who waddles around like a penguin was able to move around that house fast enough to unalive 4 people in under 12 minutes. Inflict 150 plus stab wounds, asphyxiate Kaylee, blunt force trauma, gag some of the victims, move them around from floor to floor. Do you think that he looks like he could pick up bodies? Hell.
Oh, so many crazy claims in there, Natasha. He didn't move the bodies around. He didn't asphyxiate anyone. He didn't gag anyone. No one was gagged. They're saying that there was like a gagging type injury because something was pressed against Kaylee's mouth. Whether it was his fist or the handle of the knife, etc. But nobody was like actually gagged with, they weren't tied up. They weren't gagged. He went in, he stabbed him, he left. Okay. There was no cleanup. There was no moving bodies. There was nothing like that.
He just about looks like I could put him in my pocket to get him somewhere.
Here's the thing. He may look thin, but he was a long distance runner. Okay. He ran 1.38 miles in 6 minutes and 8 seconds. That is a darned good pace. That's a 6 minute mile. I mean, less than a 6 minutes for the mile. He had endurance. He had stamina. Okay. His own lawyer admitted that he would go hiking and jogging. So this isn't somebody that had no level of physical activity and was just a skinny wimp. So no, you could not pick him up and put him in your pocket.
Do any of you know what a Stingray device is? A Stingray device is a cell tower, something that simulates a cell tower, but it has a stronger signal. So this particular item is used by higher law enforcement agencies for major crimes. Major crimes.
You mean like a quadruple homicide? I'd say that's a major crime.
It has to be actively monitored by someone who has the software on their device. That is how they were able to triangulate Brian Kohberger's signal from a Stingray. That is in the documents. They only have Stingrays in place when they are investigating major crimes. So why was a Stingray in place prior to the unalivings?
So Maury Povich would say that's a lie. the Stingray was not in place before the murders. This is the warrant authorizing the use of a trap and trace and a pen register. And also in this warrant, it does authorize if they need to use a Stingray. This was all when he was already in Pennsylvania, because remember, they didn't have his name until December 19th. So it says it is further ordered based upon probable cause that the above identified service provider, investigators, and investigating agencies are authorized to use a cell site simulator in connection with the target address. And this order was effective December 23rd, 2022 at 4:53 p. Pacific Standard Time, to be completed no later than February 23rd, 2023. So that was the authorization dates for the Stingray, December 23rd. So the address it was being used at was at Lambsden in Pennsylvania. And here is that mobility carrier request form again, and it shows you 12/23 as the date and time signed. And this is the FBI serving the warrant for the pen register, trap and chase, and the cell site simulator, December 23rd, 2022. So no, the Stingray was not in place before the murders. That's not in the documents. What's in the documents was them getting the warrant for all of the cellular surveillance on December 23rd. That was after he was back in Pennsylvania. And no, that's not how they triangulated any of his cell activity when he was in Moscow. Okay? Because a pen register and trap and trace and a cell site simulator only do things in real time. They can't go back and determine things. Those are real-time surveillance. So those 23 times that he was determined to be within 350 feet of the house were done through other cell phone analysis, not with the pen register, trap and trace, or a cell site simulator.
Then, on the 15th of December, Brent Kopacka was involved in a standoff with law enforcement that resulted in his death. Brent Kopacka was a former Special Forces military paratrooper who had combat medic experience, who lived across the street from Brian Kohberger, drove a white car similar to Brian Kohberger's, and worked at the same college.
Actually, no, Kopacka did not drive a car similar to inmate 163214's, and no, he did not work at the college. And if you want, I've shown it in another video. I can bring up again the WSU employment records because those are public information. They are on a public database. He was never employed by WSU. But also I have the police interview with two of his good friends in Pullman. And we'll take a listen to that because they talk about how he didn't have a car. He was in the process of trying to buy one, and that he didn't work.
Did he do anything for work?
He did not, no. We talked about him getting a job. He struggled just the day-to-day routine. We were starting to teach him how to get onto that type of routine.
Where does he get his money?
Through his military.
Is he retired medical?
He is fully retired medical.
100%
and,
disability?
Yes, and early.
He was very limited on transportation. He was serving out a DUI conviction down in Nevada.
Yeah.
And he was supposed to have a court date here
this week.
So he doesn't have a car.
He doesn't have a car.
No.
He was buying a car off our roommate, but he had no legal way to make it his until he got his court date settled.
He didn't have a driver's license.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I hope you found this episode of Desperate Conspira Wives very informative and helped you with some of the misinformation that's been floating around from people like Natasha. And I'm going to leave you with the wise words of Natasha. It's just too bad that when she says these things, that she's not one of the people that can be trusted to get information from. Kind of ironic.
Make sure that whoever you're listening to is telling you facts. Don't let people fill your head full of bullshit.